Hello, my ravens, and welcome back to the Ravens Perch. I am your host, Dark Prince. I'm flying solo again today after having my co-host join me for the last couple of episodes. And today, we're talking about those books. You know exactly what I mean. The books where you finish a chapter, put the book down, stare at the wall for a few seconds, and just think, what the fuck did I just read? Sometimes that's a good thing, sometimes it's because a plot twist has completely blindsided you. Sometimes it's because a character has made a decision so ridiculous that you need 5 business days to recover. And sometimes it's the dark romance books. So, you've already accepted that absolutely anything could happen. Today, I'm going to talk about some of the books and moments that have given me that reaction, what I actually enjoy about books that push boundaries, and why sometimes the most messed up stories are the ones that stick in your head the longest. I'm going to try to keep this relatively spoiler free, but obviously we're talking about dark romance and mature books today. So please check the content warnings for anything I mention before deciding to read it yourself. Right. Grab a drink, get comfortable, grab some snacks, and welcome back to the darker corner of the bookshelf. What does "what did I just read" actually mean? I should probably clarify something first. When I say "what did I just read," I don't necessarily mean that was terrible. Actually, sometimes it's the complete opposite. I love when a book makes me stop reading for a second. I love those moments where something happens that I generally didn't expect. Because we've all read stories where you can predict anything. You meet the characters, you immediately know who's getting together, you spot the villain about 3 chapters before everyone else does. You know exactly when the third act breakup is coming. And by the end, you're basically just waiting for the characters to catch up with you. But then occasionally, you find a book that throws the rule book out the window. And suddenly you're sitting there thinking, surely that's not actually going to happen. Oh, they did. Alright then. And that is the kind of book I remember. Obviously, we can't have this conversation without mentioning Haunting Adeline. If you've listened to the previous episodes, you already know this isn't exactly the first time it's appeared on the Raven's Perch. And I doubt it'll be the last. There were definitely moments reading that book where I had to stop and process what I just read. And Zaid is obviously a massive part of that. He's one of those characters where your brain can be having 2 completely separate conversations. One side is going, this man is an enormous red flag. And the book side of your brain is going, continue, carry on. And that's something I find fascinating about dark romance. A character doesn't necessarily have to be someone you'd like in real life to be an incredibly entertaining fictional character. Zaid is intense, he's controversial, he's absolutely not everyone's cup of tea, and I completely understand why, but he's also memorable. You don't finish Haunting Adeline and immediately forget who Zaid Meadows is. Whether you loved him, hated him, or spent half the book questioning your own taste in fictional men, he made an impression. And to me, that's part of what makes a character successful. What did I actually think when I first started reading Haunting Adeline? When I first started reading it, I was like, did he just... what? No. And that was like within the first couple of chapters. It's like, what did he just do to her? Did I know what I was getting myself into? Absolutely. I knew before reading it, I knew what it was going to be like. Had BookTok prepared me for it? Or made me expect something completely different? No, I knew what was going to happen. I was prepared for it. Except for that one scene that happens, which we will not talk about. And was there a particular point where I thought, oh, this is what people meant when they called it dark romance? Not really. Because for me, dark romance is really difficult to actually define properly. It's too broad of a category to pin it down to what dark romance is. But anyway, what's especially funny to me is thinking about where my reading journey started. Because I started with A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas. You know the book, also known as ACOTAR. Fantasy, romance, magic, fays, huge worlds, and plenty of morally complicated characters. Then somehow I wandered further and further down that rabbit hole. And I eventually ended up here, talking about Haunting Adeline on my own podcast. There's something quite funny about that progression. ACOTAR was basically standing at the entrance to the Dark Forest going, come on, it's perfectly safe here. It was not perfectly safe. Because I kept exploring. I started discovering darker recommendations, different authors, different characters, and eventually I realised there was this entire side of romance fiction that I hadn't really explored before. And once I started, well, here we are. So let's talk about Lights Out for a moment, because this one gave me a different kind of what did I just read reaction. Because one of the things I really enjoyed about it was the humour. Dark romance can sometimes take itself very seriously. Everything's dangerous, everyone's brooding, someone's probably standing dramatically in a doorway, and nobody has apparently experienced joy since 2007. And then you get a story that manages to combine darker elements with humour. I love that. Because the characters suddenly feel different. You're going from tension to laughing back to, oh shit. And that contrast works really well for me, especially in Lights Out, where the characters are in bed and he wakes up and somehow he's now blind. That's such a funny scene. And also when he tries to hide his voice by going, I'm Batman. Did the humour surprise me? It did a little bit. I wasn't expecting it to happen like that. Was it different from what I expected after reading other dark romances? A little bit, because every humour is different in each story. And would I recommend it to somebody who's only just starting to explore the genre? I would recommend Lights Out as your first book for dark romance. If you're new to it, that would be where you should start. Is Lights Out. And then we have Little Stranger. This is another one where I think the psychological side of the characters is what really grabbed my attention. Especially when you're dealing with characters when you're constantly trying to figure out what's actually going on inside their head. Those characters fascinate me. Sometimes the loudest, most violent character isn't necessarily the most unsettling. Sometimes it's the quiet one. The person who's watching, thinking, planning, not telling you everything. There's something about that kind of character that immediately makes me want to understand them. And when a book manages to make me uncomfortable while also making me want to keep reading, that's impressive. Because apparently my response to fictional danger is, this seems concerning. I'll read another chapter. Let's talk about dark romance readers for a second, shall we? Because I swear we are a different species. Someone recommends a normal romance and says, it's really sweet. They communicate well and have a healthy relationship. And we're like, oh, that's nice. Then somebody says, this book made me question every decision I ever made. I stared at the ceiling for an hour afterwards and you absolutely need to read the content warnings. And suddenly, add to cart. Why are we like this? Actually, don't answer that. I don't think I want to know. But there's something addictive about going into a story knowing that the author might push you outside your comfort zone. Not necessarily because you agree with what's happening, but because you want to know where the story is going. Why do dark stories stick with us? This is probably the part I find most interesting. Why do dark stories stay in our heads? I think part of it is to do with emotion. If a book makes you feel something strongly, you're going to remember it. That could be happiness, fear, anger, discomfort, shock, heartbreak, or even complete disbelief. The worst thing a book can make me feel isn't necessarily uncomfortable, it's nothing. I'd rather finish a book furious about something a character did than finish it and immediately forget everyone in it. Give me characters I can argue about. Give me decisions I don't agree with. Give me a villain I somehow understand. Give me something that makes me message someone at 2 in the morning saying, "You need to read this right now." That's the fun of it. I also want to mention this because I think it's important whenever we talk about dark romance. Enjoying something in fiction doesn't automatically mean condoning it in reality. I can enjoy reading about obsessive characters, dangerous characters, villains, morally grey relationships, and still recognise that some of those behaviours would be massive warning signs in a real relationship. Fiction gives us a controlled environment where we can explore things precisely because they're fictional. And everyone has different boundaries. Something I love might be an instant DNF for someone else. And that's fine. There's no medal for reading the darkest book. There's also nothing wrong with deciding, nope, that's too much for me to read. Know your boundaries. Check your content warnings. And read whatever the hell makes you happy. Before I disappear back into the shadows today, Ravens, I think it's time for the Ravens' verdict. And this week's question is, what is the one book that made you put it down, stare into space and think, what the fuck did I just read? No major spoilers, I just want to know the title of the book, and I want to know what kind of reaction it gave you. Shock, confusion, heartbreak? Or did the author simply have you questioning your entire existence? Leave your verdict in the comments on Spotify, YouTube, or TikTok, or wherever you're listening to your podcasts. And I'll pick some of your answers to read out on the next episode. So, until then, the court is yours. And that brings us to the end of today's episode. If you've made it this far, thank you for spending another little piece of your day here with me at the Ravens Perch. If you enjoyed today's episode, follow the podcast on Spotify, subscribe on YouTube, and share it with another reader who likes their fictional characters covered in red flags. And apparently my TBR isn't long enough already. So, I'm genuinely looking forward to seeing what books you Ravens throw at me in the Ravens verdict. Next time, we're sticking with books, but we're getting a little more personal. In the next episode, we are going to be talking about books that changed my perspective. The stories that actually made me think differently after I'd finished them. Until then, I'm your host, Dark Prince. Keep reading, keep being feral, embrace the darkness, and I'll meet you back here at the Raven's Perch. Bye!